have one question from Mr. Charan Singh Kalsi for Elizabeth Cassidy.
Hi, Elizabeth. I have a question. You are a United States Commission on the International Religious Freedom, U.S. Army, and here the New York City Police Department, they don't allow the Sikh to join the police department, or U.S. Army, they don't allow the Sikh. So far, they are having the Sikhs, those are the doctors, or one is the translator, they accepted them on the condition basis that they need them. But they don't open the employment for all the other Sikh in the U.S. Army. And U.S. Army, the biggest employer in the USA, if they say that no to the Sikh, any other employer will say that no, we don't want you. So I wanted that you should address that issue. And the other issue is India is very sincere to hang the minority, give them a capital punishment right away. But when they come for the majority, like Hindus, they said, oh, okay, we'll put their sentence to the life imprisonment. So it happened in India with the Muslim and Sikh. They give the capital punishment right away, and the Indian government is ready to execute that one. So can you please address these two issues?
Thanks. With respect to the first question, statutorily, USCIRF's mandate relates to religious freedom internationally, i.e. in other countries than the United States. Congress did not place upon us a reporting requirement about the United States. So on the issues of what the U.S. Army is doing and the New York Police Department, all I know about some of those things is what I've seen in the newspaper. We don't monitor those issues. Although I would think there are plenty of organizations that do, I just can't speak to those. On the second question about India, as I mentioned, India is one of the countries that's been on our watch list, and one of the reasons for that does have to do with issues for religious minorities. I'm not the person who covers India, so I personally haven't heard about this death penalty issue, but I will certainly bring that back to my colleague at the office and make sure that she knows about it.
Thank you, Ms. Cassidy. As we mentioned, we're running out of time. We have just two more questions, and Dr. Amarjit Singh and Kulvinder Singh from Houston or Dallas, sorry.
Texas, baby.
Texas. Big team.
I think my question is for Elizabeth. United States Commission on International Religious Freedom came into being by a Compassion Act in 1998. I had meetings a couple of years with the delegations studying the state of Sikhs in India. One time, India came close to being country of concern, which was actually not declared. Just 2-3 years ago, one delegation of USCIRF was denied access to India, wasn't given visa when they wanted to visit Odisha, where the Christians were being killed and persecuted. My question is that when USCIRF came into being, we thought that it will be something different than Amnesty International or Human Rights Watch, which is issuing reports. But even in this case, I am saying that the buck stops at the State Department. No matter what kind of report comes, India even today is the most darling country of the United States. Even if it has tested 5,000 kilometer ballistic missile, still it has been congratulated rather for that. So do you think that it had made any difference after 1998 USCIRF coming into being than just issuing reports, as US policy is not changing, particularly in Indian context? I have observed it very closely for the last 14 years.
I do think actually USCIRF's existence has made a difference, although you're right, our mandate is just advisory. That's the way IRFA is written, that's the way the statute is written. We report and make recommendations it is the State Department, the executive branch, that has to carry those recommendations out, and they don't always do so. And in particular, they haven't agreed with some of our recommendations for countries that should be named CPCs. They haven't carried out many of our other recommendations. If you look at our reporting, you'll see for the countries we report on, we have many recommendations for all sorts of aspects of U.S. policy. In terms of changing our mandate, that's an issue for Congress, not an issue for USERF. So I can't, speak to that. In terms of India in particular, it was, I believe, recommended by USERF to be a CPC for several years in around the 2002-2003 timeframe, which is before I worked at the Commission, and then subsequently has been on our watch list for a number of years. But as you mentioned, the State Department did not ever name it a CPC, and the United States does have very close relations with India. There are other countries where we have close relationships with, where USERF had recommended CPC designation, and ultimately the State Department did do it, including Saudi Arabia. But those are, we look at things from a human rights perspective and look at religious freedom and the human rights situation exclusively. The State Department and the President have to look at the entire U.S. relation with the country and all kinds of strategic and security issues that we are well aware of, but don't have to take into account. And so frankly, the fact of the matter is sometimes those other factors outweigh. One example is Pakistan. USERF has recommended that Pakistan should be a country of particular concern since around 2002, I think, and the State Department has never done so. And we can all probably figure out why that hasn't happened, given that when you read our report on Pakistan and when you read the State Department's report on Pakistan, the CPC standard is met. They have egregious laws that outlaw a particular faith. They have blasphemy laws that impose the death penalty on people. So so there are. I agree with you that the State Department may not have gone as far as some of the proponents of IRFA wanted it to go. I do think that the fact that the State Department reports on religious freedom every year and has to take these issues into account, that has made a difference. And as I mentioned, there are countries that have been designated as countries of particular concern, including our close ally Saudi Arabia. So I do think there has been some differences as a result of that.
Do we have time for one more question?
Yeah. It's really running late. We're going to do something different. If anybody has a question, get your checkbook out. And this is how it's going to work. And if anybody has a question, get your checkbook out, because I've got a guilty conscience.
Exactly.
I have not paid my ACLU dues. And so I'm paying hand, and if you've got a question, you better pay your dues. And not only that, I'm taking advantage of having a family membership. So if anybody has a question, and especially for Ms. Herman, get the check.
There you go.
Ms. Herman, I have paid my dues actually.
Then you can ask two
You guys can go online. You guys can go online. I'm actually a board member of Dallas.
Oh.
And when you
I
were
was just in
speaking,
Texas over the weekend.
yes, and when you were speaking about the Texas issue, especially about the turban issue in the courtroom, I did help facilitate that as well. But I was very interested in what we did for the youth, what we did for our children in Texas schools.
Yes.
When we jointly with United Sikhs issued a letter to all school superintendents within the state of Texas, especially where Sikh children attended. What we want to do is make that a nationwide effort. How can you assist us making that a nationwide effort and not just restricted to Texas? Because obviously Texas, with as many Sikhs as we have in Texas, we have a lot more in California, we have a lot more in Michigan, we have them in Illinois, in New York, and this kind of effort, this kind of collaborative effort is needed within all 50 states. So how can we work together with the ACLU to ensure that that happens?
It's a great question, and we have that covered because in addition to our 53 affiliates, we have a lot of national projects in all different areas that have expertise. And I can give you the email address for Dan Mack, who I think has been affiliated with Rivers before, who is part of the national office, and he works with our affiliates. So some of the cases that come up have been referred by United Sikhs or CELDEF or somebody else to a particular ACLU affiliate in a state. because in the courtroom case that I described, we needed Texas law to win that case. But you're absolutely right that these are national efforts, and I think Dan Mack is the one who's in charge of coordinating the efforts around the country. So he's the person to be in touch with.
We'll be in touch.
And Terry Burke knows him, he'll be the executive director in Texas. I'm sure many people do.
As well as Lisa Graybill.
What?
As well as Lisa, who's the legal director.
Graybill, yeah, the legal director, absolutely, the great team.
And the last question, card carrying member Kuldip Singh.
My question is to Bani Jogar. One of the good things you raised that the civil society helped you to get your identity in Egypt. So, what was so compelling? This doesn't work at all. I'm trying without mic. What was so compelling in Egypt that they came out and supported you? When I draw a parallel with Baha'i faith to what's happening in France, to say we are less than 10,000 in count, in numbers, like 7,000 Sikhs in France, as compared to other religions who are more than 5 million. So, what would you suggest to Sikhs that they should be doing so they have a buy-in of civil society in France? That's my question.
Thank you. That's a really good question because it took many years. Baha'i faith was banned by a presidential order in 1960 in Egypt. And because of that, the numbers dwindled because Baha'is' marriages were not recognized. So if a Baha'i couple got married, the wife could be arrested for prostitution. And so a lot of Baha'is started leaving the country. And young people were very, very disheartened to be living there. So today, there are less than 2,000 Baha'is in Egypt. They're Egyptians, they've been there for generations. It took a long time for civil society to wake up. We had pretty much given up on it, and then we had a few young, it's really the youth, I think, that we can really look to make change. And it was a few young bloggers that started blogging about this Baha'i friend that they had that's denied all these rights, and they're about to become stateless individuals because they don't have identification card. Because in order to be on the streets, if you're stopped by the police officer, you need an ID card. If you don't have one, you're thrown in jail. In order to get out of jail, you need an ID card. So, it was becoming a very complicated issue. So it took time, but I think it would be with the small number of Sikhs in the country when, engaging with civil society. So I think the first time someone meets a Sikh, of course, you have to explain yourself. By the way, I think some of you know, I come from a Sikh family myself. My grandfather fought for the Allies in the First World War, and he was granted an MBE, a member of the British Empire, for his service back then, and he wore a turban. There was no question of him taking his turban off and wearing a helmet. So, so this is a personal issue as far as I'm concerned too. But I think, it does require having to explain yourselves and all, but once Sikhs start engaging with civil society will stand up for Sikhs, I can assure you that.
I want to thank everybody on the